CPJ.
To protect
Committee to Protect Journalists. I am sorry. It is improperly written here. Prior to that, she served as a research assistant to the Middle East Institute and interned at the U.S. Department of State. She has also worked with Amnesty International and has written for Vice News. Fluent in Urdu and proficient in Arabic. Ms. Iftikhar.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for having me here today, and to Bibi Hana and HIRC for hosting this event. Numbers of journalists behind bars, topping off the list at 262 last year. This year, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of journalists who've been murdered for their work. So far this year, we've documented 45 journalists who've been killed in direct retaliation for their work. Jamal Khashoggi was, of course, one of these 45 journalists, and I think you've gotten a good overview of the various work he's done. But at CPJ, we continue to call for an independent international investigation to bring all the perpetrators as well as the masterminds to justice, and on Saudi authorities to return his body to his family. At CPJ, we've also welcomed the swift and bipartisan condemnation of Khashoggi's murder. To denounce the press. For some examples, earlier this year, Malaysia enacted legislation that criminalizes fake news. The newly elected government made promises to overturn it, but has not yet followed through. President Duterte in the Philippines also frequently uses the term fake news and attacks the press, specifically going after outlets that have been critical of his government's policies, like Rappler. We at CPJ, of course, don't condone disinformation campaigns, but our research shows that authorities often abuse these is a brutal form of censorship, and it's having a profound impact on the flow of information around the world. These are also the accusations on which Shahidul Alam has been jailed for in Bangladesh for more than 3 months now. As you've heard, the Bangladeshi government claims that Shahidul violated Section 57 of the country's Draconian Information and Communication Technology Act by spreading propaganda against the government and spreading false information on electronic media. This is simply not true. His own arrest came at a time when there had been several attacks against journalists in the country. Suspected supporters of the ruling Awami League Party, as well as law enforcement officials, had attacked more than a dozen journalists in the recent weeks who had been covering protests as well as municipal elections. Just earlier this week, Shahidul's 5th attempt at bail was denied by the court, despite the judge noting inconsistencies in the police report filed after his arrest and that the accusations against Shahidul didn't match the interview footage. Journalists in Bangladesh that criticizing the government can land you in jail. As the country gears up for elections next month, they cannot claim to hold free or fair elections as long as journalists are behind bars in the country. Alam's case is also not the first time that the country has used Section 57 to target journalists. In fact, the legislation was used so often that the information minister was forced to acknowledge last year that it had been misused, and the government made promises that they would repeal it. Instead, Section 57 has essentially been repackaged split between pro and anti-government factions. The net result is that the people of Bangladesh are not getting full and honest reporting on important issues. Across the border in Myanmar, the press is also under assault. In the country, the government has barred journalists from reporting on the tragedy that's taking place among the Rohingya people in Rakhine, which has killed thousands and forced 500,000 refugees across the border into Bangladesh. It's really unfortunate that as the country transitioned from military rule, the hope that an elected government under the leadership of Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi would lead to more freedom just hasn't come true. In fact, it's backtracked. Authorities are increasingly abusing military-era laws to repress reporting on a wide range of topics. And nowhere is this more emblematic than in the case of Wallon and Chaso, who are two Reuters reporters who've been in jail now for nearly a year for their reporting on the Indian massacre. As you've heard, the reporters were accused of violating a colonial-era Official Secrets Act and having secret documents that authorities claimed were sensitive to national security. During the trial, a police officer admitted that the documents had been planted, and despite this and a number of other due process violations, the two were convicted to 7 years in prison. Last week, they filed for an appeal. It's important that as Myanmar continues its transition to democracy, that it operates with rule of law and rightfully sets these two reporters free immediately. Both Bangladesh and Myanmar claim to ascribe to democratic values, but that simply cannot hold true without a free and fair press. And with US leadership lacking on press freedom, it makes it incumbent on all of us who believe in the power and the necessity of a free press to work even harder to promote these values. Thanks.